of the Housing Subcommittee on Tuesday, the 11th of October. May I just remind members that this meeting will be recorded and subsequently made available for public listening. I'll take item 1, please, which is Sederunt and apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. We've got 3 apologies today, Councillors Foster, Lever and Smith, and we have Councillor Ogilvie here as the substitute.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Jim McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's item 7. It mentions the Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust. I'm a director on there, but I don't intend to leave, as it really is only for information that it's mentioned.
Jim Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. I've asked specific governance advice on this particular matter. It's agenda item 4. I'm Chair of the Integrated Joint Board, and there is Claire was kind enough to provide me with a document here from the Standards Commission that gives dispensation for members of the IJB to make decisions on council committees, even matters of finance. So I propose to stay, but I would like it recorded that I am chair of the IJB.
Okay, thank you. And myself, similarly, item 7, I'm a board member of the Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust, but don't intend to leave the meeting for that discussion. Before we move on to the item 3, I'd just like to inform members. Councillor Carruthers, sorry.
Thanks, Craig. In regards to, Jim just raised a point in regards to being a member of the IGB. I know Dennis is as well, but along with myself. But I would just like to get a clear understanding what that declarable interest is in regards to item 4. I didn't actually pick up on that myself when I read through the report.
I think it is the fact that we are asking a transfer of finances across from this committee to a service that is now provided by the IJB. But I can let Claire come in with some governance advice on that if you want to. And I take it, Dennis, you were the same then. So that's all right.
Okay, thank you.
As I understand it, the governance is that we were exempt, same as the chairman of the IJB said, because we're allowed to vote on anything to do with the council and be exempt as IJB members.
Thank you. So, as always, it's a matter for individual members to determine whether they believe they have an interest to declare, but what I can advise is the Standards Commission have granted dispensation where individual members would wish to declare an interest or perceive there to be conflict of interest.
Thanks for that clarity, Claire.
Okay, thank you. So before we go on to item 3, I'd just like to inform members that I have been presented with a late report for this committee, which I'm prepared to accept, and we'll take that at the end of the agenda business that we have in front of you. Item 3, minutes of the meeting of the Housing Sub on Tuesday the 12th of July for approval. Great, thank you. Item 4, Housing Act 2006 Scheme of Assistance. This report is to seek members' agreement to allocate additional funding from council tax second homes to support delivery of a number of services delivered through the council's Scheme of Assistance. I shall ask Harry, have we anything to add to the report before we open it up?
No, thanks, Chair. I think the terms of the report is on the basis that it's closure, I guess is one way of describing it, closure of this current financial year's arrangements. It's made quite clear in the report that the financial commitment does not go beyond this financial year, I think, for good reason. And whilst the responsibility has been transferred over, we have still got that type of relationship with the IGB in terms of funding allocated to it. So it's simply to outline to members the position that we're looking at to get closure this financial year.
Okay, thank you, Harry. Just one point that I'd like to make before we move on to open discussion on this. I'm sure all members, as we sat at this committee earlier on in the year, when we agreed, as is mandatory by the new regulations and the setup of the IJB, that the scheme of assistance was part of the services that were transferred to the IJB and therefore would not be a responsibility of the Housing Subcommittee. And I'm disappointed that we're having to bring a report back to this committee to seek extra or additional finance towards that particular scheme when it wasn't in the initial report put to members at the time when we agreed that the scheme would be handed over. So I'll leave that as it is at the moment, and I'll take members' questions. So I have Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. If ever there's a statement, solicits a question, I would suggest it's a statement in paragraph 3.3. There are sufficient funds available in the Council Tax Fund from second homes incomes to meet the cost of the recommendations in this report. What then, Chair, will be the residue of the balance left in that particular fund or these particular funds? Let me say, in passing, Chair, more importantly, I don't have any difficulties or problems with what's being proposed in the recommendations, etc. But I would be interested to know, on the back of, or notwithstanding the comment in paragraph 3.3, how much money will we have left, assuming that we agree to pay these contributions.
Okay, thank you. Jim, are you able to answer that?
Yep, thanks, Chair. The council tax second homes income is a recurring fund that generates around £900,000 a year. So the actual balance is constantly changing depending on the income to the council. My understanding is at this point in time in the financial year, the residual balance would be somewhere in the region of £400,000, but that will change throughout the year as more income comes into the council.
Yes, Alistair, come back.
Clarification, residual balance, i.e. after the contributions have been paid.
Jim.
Thanks, Chair. My understanding is that once, if members agree these contributions, that the balance would be £400,000.
Jim Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. Just an observation and a question. I presume Jim O'Neill wasn't the author of the previous report when this omission was made, but have we made sure that in future the appropriate amount of resources have been made available to the IGB now? There is an arrangement, in fact a requirement to transfer appropriate sums for delivery of service irrespective of, of who may be delivering these services. So are we confident that we'll not get a visit from the IGB at a later date saying, by the way, here's a bill for £200,000 because you've failed to include it in the budget assessment of the arrangement that goes on year with the IGB and the council's working partnership?
Jim.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Obviously, these services were listed as a mandatory transfer into the Integrated Joint Board, but the background to the delivery of care and repair, handyvan and food train services is that members agreed budgets for service delivery through this subcommittee on an annual basis. And those amounts, if we look back over the last few years, have varied considerably year on year. So there never has been a fixed amount of budget to deliver these services. And the arrangements that are in place to deliver them are that a service level agreement is put in place with our delivery partner, Lord Burn Housing Association, on an annual basis. And that's based on the budget that this subcommittee sets. So there isn't a fixed amount. The other factor that comes into play as well is that the settlement the council receives from the Scottish Government is now varying, as everyone knows, on an annual basis. And the amount of budget we have available to spend in these services will in large part be dependent on the amount of money we receive through the Scottish Government settlement with the council. And that's why I think the point that Harry made at the beginning is that we recommend through this report that decisions are made on an annual basis so that the council isn't making commitments that it doesn't have the money to fulfil in future years.
Thanks for that comprehensive response. And obviously it's the settlement for the Scottish Government that's causing us the problem year on year, which in itself is somewhat unfortunate. But then it still begs the question, if we've been delivering the service to date and there is a requirement placed on the IGB to continue to deliver these services, then there has to be a budget associated with that. If we are saying that the IJB can consider whether or not they want to continue, and there's maybe it might finish up with a very, very unfortunate media exercise about the council failing to support the most vulnerable at a time when they need some assistance. And maybe not for today, but we might need a report back on how we manage, for wanting a better word, the relationship between Lowerburn House and the IJB, the council, and where this resource comes from in future years to deliver the service that currently we've contracted out.
Do you want to comment on that, Jim, or not?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. At the moment, the agreement is put in place annually, so beyond the current financial year, there are no financial commitments. And in terms of the mandatory transfer, it was mandatory to transfer the service into the integrated joint arrangements, but the budget wasn't fixed at a mandatory level. So it was the transfer of the service that was mandatory. So I think it would be reasonable for members to consider the budget that goes along with the service on an annual basis, given the current financial constraints we operate within.
Okay, Jim McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's really just as a follow-on for that. The top of page 6 states quite clearly, any future decisions in relation to the delivery of these services will be a matter for the IJB. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, we decide to give them dot amount of money for dot services, they can actually change their mind and actually no use them for those services, according to what it says here. Is that correct?
Jim, I don't know if you're available to answer that, so you're not part of the IJB, but if you could do your best.
I've asked Fiona Wright to come along today, who's the manager of the service currently within the integrated arrangements. But what I can say to give members some comfort is that there is a care and repair steering group that operates at an officer level, and I represent strategic housing on that steering group. And that steering group is responsible for keeping oversight of how the money is spent. And certainly through my involvement with that group so far, there has been no intention to divert from the current funding arrangements in place or to change the model of service delivery. Obviously, Fiona's the budget holder going forward. I don't know if you want to add anything, Fiona.
I would just say that the money, yes, is transferred to the IJB, but it then comes back to ourselves and the council to be able to commission and deliver that service. And as Jim said, we would have that ongoing, we have quarterly care and repair steering group meetings to be able to monitor and to review the position in terms of the finances, but also the service delivery as well going forward.
I mean, excuse me. The sort of concerns that I have with the transfer of a budget like this over, I mean, we know in the past the scheme of assistance has been the responsibility of this committee. Therefore, we've had the opportunity to either agree the delivery of that particular service, to what level we would agree the budget for that. That was again a choice for this committee. Passing it over as is put before us today, I'm concerned that we have no scrutiny or monitoring or future monitoring of that budget, of how it is spent. Is it spent wisely, the amount that is spent? And that is my concern for this committee, because it is our budget that we are passing over and we don't have the scrutiny and the monitoring services available to this, because that will be reported back to the IJB and not to this committee. Jim, if you want to come back.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I realised
Jim McClung's coming back in on
I realised that the answer was that there was no intention. There's no intention for it not to be spent for what we give it for. However, intentions can change. What I wanted an answer for was, if the intention was to change it, the IJB could change it.
Fiona, can you give any assurances?
I can give assurances for this financial year in terms of that it will be spent for this financial year what it is intended for, but I don't have any jurisdiction, if you like, over the amount of funding that we will receive going forward, because that could change. And I think, as Jim said earlier, that's a matter for for us to monitor and review, and a matter probably for this committee to consider going forward.
Jim Dempsey, is it the same point? Because I have another councillor waiting to come in.
It's the same point, and I certainly wouldn't want to hog this discussion, but there's performance monitoring papers presented to area committees on a 6-monthly basis. And members will be able to challenge, or if that's the wrong word, certainly question service delivery on any aspect of the service that IJB delivers. They may not get an answer on the day, but they'll most definitely get an answer that we will provide appropriate and effective performance monitoring on everything that IJB does. And the only other thing I would say, and it's a far, far more complex matter than we could discuss in 5 minutes sitting here, but the council went through a whole raft of measures to determine how much we should transfer to the IJB. And there's been a 2-year cushion so that senior officers can negotiate if there is an overspend or underspend in respect to the council's commitment to the IJB. And that will still go on until March. So I would hope that members would accept that this has to happen. This is a decision the Scottish Government made, and they forced social work and health to work together. And I think all members of staff and senior managers are doing their best to ensure that that actually works and serves the people of Dumfries and Galloway.
Okay, Ian Carruthers.
IGB had a workshop on bed block, and believe it or not, and this topic of conversation came up. And Jim and I, unfortunately, are at odds with this, I think, when it comes to where we think this stands. I mean, I made my point clear, but spoke a lot about housing, very, very important to both organisations. But the council is the Strategic Housing Authority. They have that level of power, authority, and I think have that level of skill as well within the departments. I know we're still delivering the service, but we're directed, you could say, as a council from the Integrated Joint Board. I think Jim's absolutely right in what he says, Jim Dempsey, that is, I think we need a further report to get absolute clarity in regards to recommendation 2.1. There's uncertainty there. It states there's uncertainty, and we need to get to the bottom of that to know exactly, because the last thing I would want to see is this housing committee being undermined by any organisation. It is a very good, hard-working committee. It's one of the best working committees I would say in the council. We see at the end of every year what we produce, what we get with the public benefits. There's so much potential. And that skill set, certainly at this moment in time, does not lie within the IGB. It's the council has a far better skill set, and we are the Strategic Housing Authority. So I can empathise with I suppose a bit of what everybody's saying, but I think the IGB needs to kind of take a backward seat, see how the council's got to react to this. We've clearly determined our budget. We went through that process. So I mean, I think, and for me, I'm looking for a further report. We'll maybe get that when we get to recommendations. Absolutely clear this up completely and see the difference between the two roles, where they lie, and where they're best placed. Because I mean, even as an IGB member, and I've sat there around the table, I've said this better sits with the council. Some members have obviously got different views, but I think we need to have that conversation further.
Okay, thank you. Alistair?
Well, I'd be doubtful, Chair, in fact, if this committee has any such discretion, because as I understand it, it's spelt out clearly and unequivocally by statute, just exactly what the situation is. And while I can understand and indeed have no problems whatsoever with members probing, for want of a better term, and asking for clarification on certain of the points which come to mind, totally supportive of that. I think we've got to be careful, Chair, that we do not create the wrong impression in doing so. Because as far as I'm concerned, these services, care and repair, food train extra and small repair services are superb services. They've conferred an awful lot of benefit and the respective client groups, the length and breadth of the region. And if in fact we're going down the route today of asking for a further report, I would like to think that at the same time we will make clear in principle our commitment to seeing these services continue and hopefully, should circumstances permit, expanding and conferring benefit in even more people. I think that's a legitimate aspiration. I think we should make that clear, Chair. But by all means, as I've said, sir, if members, colleagues want to get further information, I have no problems with that. But my understanding is, in fact, that you only have a limited amount of discretion. It's been agreed just exactly what will be transferred to the IJB. And I would like to think that, you know, if we do fund, I've got to be honest and say it's a rather convoluted way of dealing with things, in my opinion. But if we do fund at the end of the day, there will be robust monitoring arrangements in place. Plus the fact I would like to think that the IJB would come to the appropriate committee of the council, you know, with a plan or proposals as to what they're intending to do for the subsequent financial year, spelling out to the council as the funder just exactly, you know, what they intend to do and how they intend to what money they're looking for and how they intend to spend it. You know, I'm not particularly in one of the many areas of life that I'm not particularly knowledgeable about. Would be the rationale and the reasoning behind the establishment of such as Swestrans. But I would like to think that there is something of an analogy there in relation to Swestrans' relationship with the council and the IJB's relationship with the council as well, Chair, in the respective spheres of influence. Grateful to you for your time, sir.
Thank you. Other members at the moment? Jim McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Seeing as it was me that poked the stick in the hornet's nest here, let me just make my position perfectly clear. I fully support the organisations in here and the care and repair and food training and small repairs and all the rest of it. My concern is the way the report is worded is next year we could hand over dot amount of thousands and the IGB could decide not to spend it on what it is. So therefore, when it comes to the recommendations, I've got a proposal to slightly change the wording of recommendation 2.
I think members as well, just something that may or may not add to the discussion, but we have to remind ourselves that the council tax second homes money is ring-fenced to be spent on houses. As far as we're concerned, it's a housing sub, and we allocate that money, it must be on housing. We have no option on that, it's ring-fenced for that very purpose. So, as Councillor McClung has stated, if the IJB decide not to do that, then in effect, we could reserve the right to reclaim that money back, because we are guaranteed, or we are limited as well as to the spend of that money, and it has to be, if I think I'm correct, Jim, that it must be spent on housing. So that must be borne in mind as we're making this decision. Jim Dempster.
Food train's no housing, Chair, but it's a very, very worthwhile project that's supported across the board. I think the phraseology was the money would be used in an appropriate fashion determined by the housing subcommittee. I don't think it was very specific about housing. The only other thing I would pick issue about was we need to be very careful about the language, and Alistair Geddes is quite right in what he says, but he did say, go on to say the money the IJB are looking for from the council. The IJB are not looking for it. You have been instructed to hand it over, and I know that may be contentious, but we have been told that we have to provide the funding associated with the work we do with the elderly in our society. The money has to go. They're not looking for it, the IGB. They're telling you, not only that, you could well decide to create a budget saving of 10% on the 60 million, whatever it is, that's handed to the IGB. They can just say thanks, but no thanks. And they're entitled to instruct you or the council to hand that money over. So there's a very complicated mechanism associated with this. And the IGB members should understand that, and I wouldn't want to take up the whole day discussing IGB. It's been very clear, the process, been very clear, the outcome. Members have been advised at full council what happens. There's a mechanism in place, and if that mechanism is to be changed, I would suggest you need to go back to the government to change it.
Okay, Ian Carruthers.
Thanks. I mean, I think Jim Dempster's bringing up some relevant points, and that's why I'd like to see a further report. Because if it applies to the council in regards to the housing committee, then it would apply to the NHS and the half a dozen committees that they've got as well. Because they put forward 85% or so of their budget towards IGB. So does that then mean the IGB's got to start up a new committee for everything and look at absolutely everything? I don't believe they have. I think they've got that overarching broad remit to look at delivering the service, concentrate on the strategic plan, I'll leave it to the two parties to deliver that. And I think the Housing Subcommittee is essential to the Council delivering its role as Strategic Housing Authority. And that's the point I'm trying to get across. Maybe I'm not putting it across in the best way, but I think there's a lot of relevant points being brought up here, but for me, a further report clarifying all these points needs to be brought, because I think if taking Jim's point on board there, if that's the case, then that puts the IGB in real terms in another full authority with another half a dozen committees to be brought up, and we're not, last thing we're here today is discuss, as Jim's already said, is the IGB, but obviously it's important that we get this right.
Alistair?
Well, I think, Chair, it's essential and imperative to keep a balanced perspective in all of this. That, without trying to be disparaging to any of the comments that have already been made, if in fact we are allocating money to the IJB for a specific purpose, and you have pointed out that, the monies from this particular fund are required to be used, as it were, in relation to housing purposes, do you seriously think that the IJB are going to willfully and deliberately take that money and apply it to a totally different purpose? Come on. Let's, as I say, by all means, Chair, look at the issues which perhaps need to be looked at, need to be clarified. But let's do it. Let's, as I've already indicated, adhere to the view that it's imperative that, as far as we're concerned, these three valuable and worthwhile programmes are allowed to continue, and some of us would hope flourish, and get on and get the business done.
Any further members? Jim McClung?
Yeah, just regarding food train, it's not the food train that we're actually supporting here. Food train extra, which does jobs in folks' houses, especially the elderly. So it's no food train, it's food train extra that this money's for.
I mean, I don't think any members present have any other thoughts than the three organisations that are there and have provided these services on our behalf as a subcommittee in the past are anything but worthwhile. And I don't think there's any doubt about that between any of the members present. I think it's just, I think it's more of a concern of how we monitor the spend of a budget that we are passing over. That is my concern, of how we monitor that going forward. To me, that is the issue. It's not the actual spend of the money on those services. It's how we're passing over a budget that it is not within our remit to control. So that is my real concern over the issue. It's not about the spend or the organisations mentioned in the papers at all. And that's what members here today have to decide how they would like to take that forward. Well, there's no further questions. We need to have a decision one way or the other on this. So I'll start off. I presume there's going to be some added recommendations coming in here. So I'll start off going at 2.1. Members are asked to note there was a continuing uncertainty regarding the Council's annual financial settlement with the Scottish Government, and this inhibits the Council's ability to make future financial commitments about the level of funding available to transfer to the Integrated Joint Board to support the delivery of care and repair, food train extra and small repairs and home support services. Members happy to note that? Alistair?
No, without wishing to be provocative, Chair, I would suggest that we note with regret.
Ha. Members?
Chair, can I say, with your leave, it's not an ideal situation in which we find ourselves. And I think it's legitimate, in these circumstances, to express a regret about the fact that, we are having to face this situation. And that would be my view, Chair, irrespective of the political hue, colour or persuasion of central government.
Okay, Claire, can we have that note with regret added into the recommendation? 2.2, agree to receive an annual report that seeks members' agreement on the level of funds to be transferred from the Council to the Integrated Joint Board to support the delivery of these services. Jim McClung?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I would probably want a little bit added in there, and it would be agree to receive an annual report on the use of the previously agreed funds transferred to the IGB and seek members' agreement on the level of funds to be transferred to the council to the integrated joint board to support delivery of these services. Because we're agreeing what we're going to give for the next year, but I would like a report on what we got for our money for the last year as well at the same time.
Dempster first.
You can't do that, Chair. It's not competent. You can't ask a different organisation to provide you with evidence or information. You can ask, but you're not necessarily getting it, and you need to be sure of that, and I'm quite sure Claire will advise us of that. You cannot instruct another organisation to comply with conditions.
Claire, can you give some governance advice?
That is correct. All this committee could do would be to ask for that information, but there's already monitoring scrutiny arrangements agreed, set out as part of the integration scheme and reporting into different committees of this council.
Jim, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, well, in that case, I want to ask them, because if they don't need to tell us, that rings alarm bells even more with me, unfortunately. And the monitoring agreement at area committees, that's only going to be disaggregated down to area committee level, not a housing sub level. We're here as a housing sub. We're giving money to the IJB to support the organisations and the work that's ongoing here, not as an area committee. It's the housing sub that should know what the funding is being used on.
Alistair?
Chair, if Councillor McClung wants to amend his proposal in the light of the Governor's comments and the Governor's advice that we've heard, I, for my part, would be delighted to second them. But as I've said, you know, at the end of the day, I think we've got to take a balanced perspective in this. You know, I cannot, for the life of me, foresee a situation where the IJB is willfully, as it were, almost confrontationally going to seek to pick a fight, you know, with Dumfries and Galloway Council in relation to these areas of its activity.
Okay. Dennis? Okay. Jim Dempster?
Thanks, Chair. Propose we take recommendation 2.2 as set out in the report.
Well, I have Ronnie as well come in.
Just fresh eyes at it. I'm not any previous history here, but if you read the top of page 6, and I know it refers to January 16, but it does say the senior managers will be discussing things to ensure a seamless transition. Has the senior managers, I take it it's the IGB and the council, have they managed to find a way forward, or they're still looking at a seamless transition? And that would might answer the question about a future report, because once they've agreed what they see as a seamless transition, it might come back to this committee. So that might serve the purpose that members are asking.
Harry, are you able to add anything, or I'm certainly happy to take your comments on the discussion so far.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I think there is ongoing constructive discussion between senior officers in both NHS and Council in the widest sense, in terms of the huge organisational change that's happening across the country in relation to health and social care integration. So on that basis, yes, specifically in relation to housing subcommittee remit, obviously, as already been said, it's got the delegated authority to support the council to discharge its strategic housing function. I guess if the housing subcommittee requires information from partners to help inform the best way to discharge its duties, I guess that would be a reasonable question to ask, because there are a whole range of different factors that influence housing needs. We've got other reports on the agenda this afternoon that do exactly that. So I think, picking up on a couple of members' comments about future delivery of the service, yes, the responsibility for delivering that service quite clearly sits in statute with integrated joint board. The resource allocation and the way that impacts and the way we discharge our housing services as a local authority, there may well be some performance information that we would find useful to enable us to do that to best effect in partnership. And I think that's the point I would want to stress. It's in partnership as opposed to a different type of relationship, if that's helpful to members.
Okay, members, any further comments on that? Because we have, if I'm correct, we have a proposal change the amendment from Councillor Dempster, from Councillor McClung,
Yes,
and Councillor Dempster is saying that we go with the amendment, with the recommendation as is. So can we have that confirmed up, please? Councillor McClung.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy to request rather than demand that we get a report on the previously agreed fundings for the IJB.
Alistair?
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay. Jim? Are you happy to accept that or not?
No.
So I have a, no, I don't have a seconder for Councillor Dempster at the moment, for an amendment. Oh, so okay, we're actually going for a vote on 2.2 of the recommendations. And just for clarity, Claire, can you put both aspects of that forward?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we have a motion proposed by Councillor McClung, seconded by Councillor Geddes, to request information from the IGB on the use of previous agreed funds transferred, and then the wording would go on as 2.2 currently is, and agreed to receive an annual report that 6 members' agreement on the level of funds to be transferred from the Council to the Integrated Joint Board to support the delivery of these services. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy that it's a request on the previous one.
And we have an amendment proposed by Councillor Dempster, seconded by Councillor Mayo. Basically, the wording of recommendation 2.2 is currently in the report. Okay, to go to the vote then. Chairman,
Amendment.
Councillor Carruthers,
Motion.
Councillor Dempster,
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes,
Motion.
Councillor McClung,
Motion.
Councillor Mayo, Councillor Nicholl,
Motion.
Councillor Prentice,
Amendment.
sorry, amendment, and Councillor Ogilvie.
Amendment.
Amendment carries 5 votes for.
Okay, move on to 2.3 of the recommendations. Agree to allocate £287,400 from the council tax and second homes budget to support the delivery of the care and repair, food train extra and small repairs and home support services at their current levels for 2016-17. Agreed. 2.4, agree to allocate £100,000 from the council tax and second homes budget to support the continued delivery of the below tolerable standards grant scheme for the remainder of 16-17. Great. Yes. Councillor Cruz.
Right, thanks, Craig. I agree with that. I just asked for recommendation 2.5 to be added in regards to a further report to give us absolute clarity on the uncertainty that we've received today. I just, unless we either add that as a recommendation or you do that under your own delegated authority as chair, but I'd really like to see it clearly set out in a report where the House Committee sits within the council, how it'll deliver its functions as it sits because of the changes that in the Integration Joint Board, Chairman.
Claire? Yes.
There's been a number of reports written about the IGB and how those fit with the council's committee. I'm just wondering what that report would add, which isn't already there, just for clarity.
I suppose it's just so we're absolutely clear on what a remit is. I mean, because of the questions that have been asked today, I think it's been questions that actually they would cast out over the level of knowledge that the members around this table in this committee actually have in regards to what the remit of the Housing Committee is. I think it has a clear remit. The Council is the Strategic Housing Authority, as I've already said on numerous occasions. I think we need to make that absolutely clear. Because when it comes to the delivering of the services and it comes back, we do have a monitoring remit over that, and that's part of our duties as a committee. I think that needs to be set out to be absolutely clear.
Chair.
Yes,
Councillor
Jim.
Carruthers is a member of the IGB. If he doesn't care what they're doing, there's something wrong. And I don't know what it is he's asking.
Chairman,
He
I
should
absolutely
know
do know
exactly what the
I do
IGB
understand
does.
that for sure, and that's why I'm asking. It's not myself I'm referring to.
Harry?
Well, if it's
are
not
you-
yourself, other
Harry-
members can surely
Right,
ask.
members, please. Harry, are you able to come in with some advice?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, members have already agreed to receive an annual report in terms of subsequent levels of funding, and it may be helpful at that stage to include in that report the context about the role of the Housing Subcommittee and what hopefully any resources that it allocates would be used to discharge. And I think that would possibly keep the context focused on the respective remits of the IGB and the Housing Subcommittee or the Strategic Housing Authority.
I'm not going to go against that. I just feel it's a waste of time. Because everybody should know. If they don't understand what's happening, there's something wrong.
I'm happy for that to be added on to the future report. That was agreed to in 2.2, rather than have a second, an added recommendation. Take that back there. Okay, members, moving on. Item 5, housing needs and demand assessment. Jim, Harry, have you anything else to add to the report? No. Okay, I'll just throw that open to members.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, really a question. It's a couple of clarifications that they could possibly be supplied for me in by the officers. In page 121, table 517, where they give the number of care homes, residential care homes in Dumfries and Galloway. Total's 30, but it says Stranraer and Mid Galloway, and I do realise that Mid Galloway HME takes a little bit of the Stewartry in, but it says there if you add Mid Galloway and Stranraer together, that's 8. That says 8. However, the locality plans for the IGB, which I have read, actually states there's only 5 in Wigtonshire. How have we come up with a different number for care homes under the housing needs to the difference for the locality plans? And regarding the next page, in page 520, regarding supported accommodation, an explanation why the Stewartry is an estimated number when Annandale, Eskdale, Nistdale and Wigtonshire are all definite numbers.
Can Councillor McClung confirm what pages he's talking about, Chair?
Yeah, Chair, I did say page 121 and then the next page over.
Jim, are you able to add to that? I'm not sure whether you'll be able, because you won't have carried out this particular study yourself, but I don't know whether you're able to assist with the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In relation to the number of care homes in the region, obviously we rely on the information provided to us by social work and NHS colleagues. The figure of 31 was actually reported to Social Work Services Committee on the 27th of October 2015 in the Chief Social Worker's annual report. So that's the source of the 31 figure.
Jim, come back in.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm being told that the locality plans that have been issued for the IGB are actually wrong.
I think Jim's saying that he's just, that information has been transferred and agreed to the Social Work Committee, so yes, Councillor Carruthers.
I mean, I don't know, Chair. We have just been through a commissioning process when it comes to care homes. I don't know if that's the reason why. Maybe we picked up. I don't know if that's something to do with it or not, but it's only just happened.
Alistair?
Well, Chair, in an effort to be helpful in a Mid-Galloway context, I'm sure my colleague Councillor Nicholl will agree with me that there are 3 in Mid-Galloway, Westview Monreath, Cumloden Manor and Cornwall Park. So at least we've got that bit right. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask that officers clarify that figure and come back to you, Councillor McClung, with that information?
Yeah, as I say, Annandale and Eskdale, it says, if you look at that table, that there's 2, whereas the locality plans say there's 8. The total numbers don't really make much difference. It says in here that there's 31. If you add them all up in the locality plan plus the major plan for the whole of the region, it says there's 30, so there's not really much difference. But I'm struggling to find out how they get the numbers that they say there's 5 in Stranraer. I only know of 2.
Jim, can you clarify that information and come back to the councillor with that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think the best thing to do under the circumstances is go away and interrogate the information that we've got and probably update it as well, because the figures were taken at a point in time. And I think I heard another member make the point that the circumstances could have changed since then. So what we'll do is take Councillor McClung's concerns and get back to him with a specific answer in the points that he's raised out with the meeting, if that's okay.
Can that be circulated to all members, Chair?
Yes, if that could be circulated to all members, then, please, for this committee. Any other members? Ronnie?
Some anomalies have been picked up, yet the recommendations say this is an excellent report and no need to consider it again. So is the recommendation still stand?
Well, I think it is an excellent report. There is a lot of very good information there which will supplement the local development planning going forward, and that is the purpose of this particular document. It wasn't commissioned by us, but it is there to support the local development plan.
Thanks, Chair. The process for agreeing a housing need and demand assessment is set out by the Scottish Government, and it's the Scottish Government's role to assess whether the document produced has achieved robust and credible status. And members will see in the appendix of the report that this document has been through that process and has been signed off as robust and credible by the Scottish Government Centre for Housing Market Analysis, and that's the process laid out in both statute and guidance that has to be followed when undertaking a housing need and demand assessment, and that's the process that we've complied with.
Alistair?
I think we should pay tribute, Chair, to the time and energy and effort that's been put in by our staff and all concerned into what is a quality report. And again, going back, Chair, I would suggest, in fact, you change the recommendation in the first, the 2.1 to note and approve. Because at the end of the day, as I say, we've worked hard on this, we'll produce something which is worthwhile. It's been recognised by the Scottish Government, and I personally find that a cause for approval.
Well, I'm happy to take that forward if other members are in agreement. Okay. Thank you. So recommendations 2.1 to note and approve, and 2.2 to note. Is happy with that? Thank you. Moving on, item 6, Strategic Housing Forum and Development Forum. Harry, have you anything further to add?
Yeah, just a brief introduction, Chair, and no doubt specific questions Jim will be able to pick on. This report carries on from the discussion that we had at the last Housing Subcommittee, and I think there was a clear appetite from members to ensure that their scrutiny role in relation to housing issues is fully discharged, and that strategic housing issues are well informed, well researched and prepared in such a way that when it does come in front of the committee that the necessary due diligence has been discharged. So this report outlines some of the developments that we are putting forward that I believe will help this committee fully discharge its remit moving forward. As I say, I'm happy to answer any other questions that members have got, Chair.
Okay, just before I open it up to members, what I'd like to do is I'd like to take you through this report by the various headings rather than jump back and forward asking officers questions. So if that's okay with members, I'd like to start off with the questions on 3.1, the local housing strategy. No, members happy with that? Okay, 3.2, Strategic Housing Forum. Members' questions I'll take on that. Jim McClung?
Yeah, it may just be a misprint, but the recommendation 2.2 is asking us to nominate a member for this sub to be chair of the Strategic Housing Forum. Yet at 3.2.5 it says this report recommends that membership of the Strategic Housing Forum will include members of this committee.
Yeah. What it's, I think maybe need a bit of clarification on that going forward, but I think the, when this was originally set up, from what I understand, that all members of this committee would be part of the forum, and a member of this committee would be asked to chair the forum. And I think that is what is the strategy, that's the forum, sorry. So I think that's what was intended. It might not be particularly clear, but what members may rather, and we can come to that when we come to the recommendations, but rather than have this whole committee sit as part of that forum, it might be advisable that we take one member from each of the political groups off this committee to sit on that forum, rather than the whole committee, but that's open to members to decide. Councillor Carruthers?
Just come back a few years, it was designed the same way then as what it is now, and the chair, which would be yourself in this case, chaired it, and all members were members of it, very few turned up. So, I mean, I don't think there'll be a problem being overcrowding anything like that. So, I see where you're coming from, but I think all members, I'd be keen to see all members on as members of the Strategic Housing Forum.
Well, I have no issues with that. It's up to members' decision. But Jim, do you want to clarify that point, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, this is basically an update report from decisions that were made back in 2010 and 2012. And as you rightly pointed out, at that time, it was the whole committee that was invited to be part of the Strategic Housing Forum. My only concern going forward would be about the group being effective in terms of the numbers of people that are on it, and that's maybe something that the committee wants to consider. But it's entirely up to members whether it's a small number of representatives or the whole committee. In the past, it was the whole committee that were invited.
Yeah, well, it's free for members to decide. Any other questions on that particular? No? Okay, 3.3, the Homelessness Strategy Steering Group. Alistair?
Well, I must confess, I don't want to anticipate, the discussion and the item on this service later on in the agenda, Chair, but I will say, and I make no apologies for saying it, that if you want, in my view, if you want to increase the operational effectiveness of various departments, etc., of this council, I think that one of the best ways of doing it, in fact, is to have the appropriate seating of elected members in these groups, etc., who can shine a light in the areas in which it needs to be shone and brought back, as it were, to the appropriate committee. Now, as I've said, I don't particularly want to anticipate the discussion in relation to the review of our homeless service later on in the agenda, but I would have thought that both this and the Development Forum, in my opinion, warrant an elected member presence. Not suggesting for one moment, Chair, that there is a dichotomy between operational matters, which are the province, as it were, of the officials of this council, and strategic type matters. But elected members always have the right, as it were, to shine a light, as I put it earlier, on operational situations and operational issues, with a view, apart from anything else, to enhancing levels of performance. And I think that this council has suffered in the past by virtue of the fact that that's not the case. And I would like to think that in both this group and the Development Forum, that would be recognised and that there would, in fact, be some sort of provision made for that in the appropriate fashion. I'm not suggesting that the members of this committee, I'm arguing principle, Chair, and I'm not suggesting that members of this committee, turn up or are appointed, as it were, mob-handed. I'd be quite content. I appreciate that, you know exactly probably looking for work, but I would be more than content, to see you discharge that function and that role in relation to these forums, because, without patronising in the slightest, you've been assiduous in anything I've seen in reporting back to this committee when you've represented the interests of the committee and organisations such as this, or on external organisations, and I would commend you unreservedly for that. But I personally feel, Chair, that as I say, okay, we've got, we're setting up forums which primarily are operational in nature. Elected members are excluded from these. I'm uneasy with that because, as I say, it's standing our less than perfect history, and I'm sorry to have to say that. I think that there should be provision made for an elected member or members, in fact, to be there, shine the light where it needs to be shone, and get it brought back, in this instance, to the likes of the Housing Subcommittee. And that's my views on that, sir.
Okay, Alistair? Anybody in disagreement with that? I mean, suppose in 3.32, it gives the opportunity for that to happen, Alistair, because it's a home strategy drawn from the Strategic Housing Forum, of which we are all therefore members. We've just sort of discussed that. So that gives an opportunity to take an elected member from that to sit on that group, if that's what members require. Okay. Ian?
Thanks, Chair. Different point. Just it's a wee bit of a tenuous link, but I'm picking up on the 3.4, and as you've just touched on it, because the 5 bullet points at the end, and something that's happened particularly in Arndale and Eskdale, you're well aware of it, and Housing Market area. Just
a second, Ian. Are you going on to the Development Forum?
Yep, sorry, I am. Sorry, I thought you were taking them both at the same time.
No, okay.
Okay. No, sorry. Okay.
Is there any further questions on the homelessness strategy? No. And Harry, would you take that point forward about an elected member being part of that?
Councillor Gerrits mentioned before
Yes.
Homelessness improvement plan on later on item 8 of the agenda, so quite happy to go into more detail at that stage.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to 3.4, the Development Forum. Ian?
Thanks, Chair. Just in regards to, let's say, top of page 146, we've got a particular issue. I see Education Services are sitting on that Development Forum, or at least being proposed to. We've got a particular circumstance in our own area, Banana Housing Market area, where any new application, plan application gets permitted now unless you're a registered social landlord, or it's for affordable housing. There's a £10,500 levy placed on every individual house. And I think it's down to Education Services that that's there. So, I mean, I could almost take umbrance to that because I've certainly got difficulty with that. I raised it through the EI committee at the time. And that's a levy that Council's placing on particular, well, I think it'll almost stop some development in certainly down in our area. We've had a lot of lobbying from different developers in that area. So we have to make sure that, going back to what Alistair said, we've got the right people in that. We have got the right people. And again, I would agree with what Alistair said. And it could just as easily be yourself, Chairman. That would be an appropriate allocation if that's what you felt, unless you felt not that yourself. But I think it should be an elected member sitting there as well.
Jim Dempster?
Just in response to Ian, and I know it's very, very difficult to follow things when there's so many committees, not only in a small proportion of them. But one of the reasons that levy was proposed was because if developers kept building houses...
Jim, we're not here to discuss the actual developer contribution side of it.
It was raised, so it's important that the other side of the coin is explained. And that would be the financial impact of this council building new classrooms in schools to accommodate new children unless developer contributed. So it's a two-way route, is all I'm saying, Chair, not necessarily need to discuss it today.
Jim, would you like to come in with any advice, shall we say?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The intention of the development forums to be a kind of pragmatic, operational problem-solving group that looks at things like, for example, difficulties getting water connections, difficulties with listed buildings, contaminated land, very practical issues that can stand in the way of a development being delivered. However, I'm aware that in your role as chair, you've actually participated in some of those discussions already. And if members were seeking member representation on the group, then I would ask that is limited in number because of the very operational focus of it. I don't think there would be a difficulty, certainly from my perspective, with there being an elected member on the group, but really it's very much about practical problem solving, and that would generate reports back to this committee. So, for example, if there were barriers to delivering a particular development that prohibited it going ahead, and it was required to come out of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, that would be a trigger for a report back to the subcommittee. So the intention isn't to take things away from members, it's to problem solve early, to be proactive, and to result in a better standard of report and a better standard of development proposal being brought to this subcommittee is the intention.
Yes, Ian.
Same point. I suppose going back to the point I was trying to emphasise wasn't so much the developer's contribution. I'll do that through a different format, a different committee, different way altogether. But it's the membership that's on there. I think council would have waited forward and said, "Where's the private?" I don't see any there for the private sector either. We've also got affordable housing through the private sector, and I think it's absolutely right. If it's there to look at problems, solve them, see it from every angle, every avenue, then there's to be kind of an oversubscription of membership, but we need to see all parties represented.
Yeah, I mean, I've no problems with that, but 3.4.2, I would imagine gives that availability to bring other services or membership onto that if it's an ad hoc issue. I don't think that the membership that is put forward there is restrictive at all. I think that was just a base and core membership there for the RSLs, etc., and the various services to try and take developments forward. And I'm assuming that the setup of such a forum such as that is so that we don't go back into the situation that we've incurred through the Friars Venal, where it's come back to this committee time and time again, where there's been various issues brought up that stopped the development moving forward. And this might be a way of tackling some of them problems before it gets to that stage, and before identifying them, certainly before it comes back to this committee. But I'm happy to take members' lead. Alistair.
Well, I'm totally supportive, Chair, of just exactly what you've said, but I still adhere to my position. I still think it would be beneficial for yourself if you'd be prepared to do it, as it were, to be the link, from this committee to this forum. I notice it's to be held quarterly. I would anticipate that there would be reports come from each quarterly meeting back to this committee, and I personally would find it helpful, and not to say, or not just helpful, reassuring as well, for you to be here, and be able to speak to just exactly, or to reinforce just exactly what was discussed, what the issues were, and how what the decisions have been, with the view to overcoming these and developing what is an extremely important strand of our work.
Okay, if members want me to do that, I'd be happy to take that one. Ian?
I would like to, I'd agree with that entirely. I think it should be yourself under that position you're in right now. And I think we should always be looking at somebody for the private sector, with private sector landlords and developers for that matter. Whether we get somebody or not, but I think we should at least try and get somebody, or we've got a major, I think the largest, if I'm correct from memory, the largest share of the rented sector in Dumfries and Galloway is delivered through the private sector, not the social sector. So there we go. We're looking at that, saying, well, we'll exclude the largest provider in Dumfries and Galloway from actually seeing any potential hurdles we might see, whether it's through the planning process, education, whatever it might be. I think we're being too exclusive if we don't bring the private sector in.
Okay, members' decision. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The purpose of the development forum is focused on the delivery of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, rather than all housing development in the region. It's the programme that's agreed through this subcommittee will be the focus of the work of that group. And where a private developer has a scheme included within the Strategic Housing Investment Programme, there'd be absolutely no problem at all in that developer being invited onto the group if there are issues to discuss in relation to that particular development. The way the report's constructed is to allow that degree of flexibility, because the issues will vary from development to development, and the group needs a degree of flexibility to address the range of issues that may come to the fore. But to be absolutely clear, if there are problems with a private development that's contained within the Strategic Housing Investment Programme, then they would be invited to the meeting. The key is that it's contained within the Strategic Housing Investment Plan.
Okay, thank you. Any further members' questions? No. Go back to the recommendations in place. 2.1, agree to refresh the Strategic Housing Forum as described. 2.2, agree to nominate a member of this subcommittee to be chairperson of the Strategic Housing Forum, and membership of this committee, all members of this committee to be a part of the Strategic Housing Forum.
Do you need a formal nomination at this stage, Chair? If you do, I nominate you.
Okay. Not sure whether to thank you for that or not, but I'll take the nomination on.
A suitable full brown envelope later on will be adequate.
Have you got a note of that, Claire? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. 2.3, agree to put in place a homelessness strategy steering group as described, as with, and the chair of this committee to be a part of that. Add that in. 2.4, agree the homelessness strategy steering group. Chairperson is the head of customer services. Agreed. 2.4, note development forum will be put in place, and once again, chair of this committee to sit on that forum. Yeah, that's what I said. Did I? Sorry, beg your pardon, 2.5 that was. You happy with that, Claire? Got all those? Thank you. Item 7, Strategic Housing Investment Plan 2016-17. Jim, have you anything to add to the report?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing to add to the report, but we've got James Shirazi and Graham Harper here from DGHP and Lord Burn Housing Association, respectively, to help answer any detailed question that members may have about development.
Could I ask gentlemen if you'd come forward, please, in case there are any questions, or have they got microphones available where they are? Thank you. I'll open it up to members' questions. Jim Dempster.
I suppose it's impossible not to be parochial in this particular committee paper. But anyway, compliment first in a question. I'm delighted that James is now progressing the proposals for a solution to the old primary school in Sank, and I'm more than happy with progress. I can't even say it right. Progress to date. However, reading this paper, apparently DGHP are awaiting clarification from the Scottish Government about funding for the Vennel. I thought a month ago we agreed it was an unmitigated disaster and something should be done, and we allocated a huge swathe of money to ensure that project went ahead. I find it particularly disappointing if for some reason the Scottish Government's dragging their heels. But maybe James could tell us exactly what the situation is in respect to that, because I wondered by it last week, and it's really a shame.
No, I mean, I agree. I think this committee agreed to allocate the extra funding to that, and we were given the confirmation that that is all that would be required to take that project forward and actually get a start on site from this committee agreeing that additional funding, which we did. And I'm sure members will remember there was a big discussion on that at the time. And it is disappointing to see that that project has not progressed further. But James, would you like to come in on that, please?
Sure. Thank you, Jim. The government introduced the Infrastructure and Investment Fund around Easter time last year to help projects, difficult projects, mostly to do with infrastructure, but some where that there was problems with the site. And in this one, they've identified that the ground and the gable wall is a difficulty that they can fund. At the last committee meeting when we were here, we had made an application. The council acts as the kind of strategic authority, and they prioritise where that fund goes to. The government have, in principle, agreed to it. It's their number one project at the moment to fund. And what hasn't happened at the government, though, is they don't know how to administrate that fund yet. That's the problem. It's not that they're not given the funding. It's just the administration behind it. And, I think every week we're hoping we'll get that administration and they're dragging their feet on it. So it's not a case that we won't get the funding. It's just a case of, once the government manage to catch up with their own administration of that new fund, that we can get go ahead. But as far as everything else is concerned, we have concluded. We've now got all the site compounds agreed with Lawburn Housing Association, and we're grateful for their cooperation. We've got the legal agreements with the adjoining buildings on either side, so everything's ready to go, other than the final green light from the government.
Thanks, James. But I suppose that begs the question as well. Then, if you know that the funding allocation has been agreed, and it's just the administration to sort it out, you already have £1.4 million worth of funds allocated to the project, which I would imagine would at least get you a start on the site, since you have confirmation of those funds coming forward. But, Alistair?
I appreciate, Chair, that maybe small beer are considered small beer in the greater scheme of things, but paragraph 3.3.3 in relation to the proposal to take 3 self-built plots from Monreath, the village of Monreath, and use them, as it were, for housing, as it were, suitable for elderly people, has obviously got to be good news for a peripheral rural village. Maybe we wouldn't quite go as far as the late David Coleman and say they'll be dancing in the streets of Monreath the neck, but I'm sure that there'll be a considerable degree of satisfaction that they can see the light at the end of the tunnel for what was a well-meaning but contentious proposal, Chair. And I think, you know, you could probably appreciate that more than anyone else in this chamber, myself included. But we're getting there, and I think that's good and commendable, and particularly the type of housing that's being suggested. So, as I say, no problems with any of the proposals, but I think it's worthwhile, you know, to flag up that one and pay tribute to all those, yourself included, who put in an awful lot of energy and effort into getting a workable compromise out of this.
Yeah, I completely agree with your comments to the fact that we get that site moving forward and get it completed. Ian?
Thanks, Chair. Under 3.3.2, the same paragraph as what else is referring to there. Nelson's Yard, that's been kind of rumbling about for quite a while, even though it looks as if it's back on as new again. Any progress in, or even time scale in regards to how that might progress?
We've, subject to agreement today, got the project into the ship and got funding agreed for it. We're in negotiations with the site owners just now to purchase the site, and I can certainly update Jim and the rest of you on that. We hopefully reach agreement on that.
Excellent, thanks very much.
Jim Dempster?
Thanks, Chair. Not necessarily on the content of the report, but I think it's worth asking the question. I know James has accommodated me in the past, and he will again. One of the issues localised, maybe the wrong thing to say that, but one of the issues that cause people a lot of concern is when developments are completed and the periphery or the land around them isn't maintained to what would be described as an acceptable standard. And it's even worse when folk, when certain organisations start to contend or argue who owns what. So I'm about to ask both of these folk if they'll meet them at some stage to discuss who owns what in one of the places I represent. But I think it's important to, when developments are completed, to be absolutely sure who owns what, and there's a decent maintenance regime put in place, because it detracts from the final or the end product when the building itself looks fine and the remainder of the land isn't maintained and looks like a bit of a building site. So if that can always be borne in mind when developments are completed, and I would ask to meet with them both at some other stage just to discuss issues that are
Get nods of agreement from both gentlemen there. So, and if you could make your efforts and have a meeting with Councillor Dempster to see that. But yeah, by all means.
Yes, Jim. No. What we both have in place is we'll have the title ownership of the property that we purchase. If there is any common ground, then it's incumbent upon us to maintain that piece of ground after development. What sometimes can happen is if it's common ground and we've sold some of those houses, those pieces of ground will be written into the new title deed share of the owners coming in to that purchased land. So it'll be incumbent upon them that they will take on the responsibility of the title deed share of the maintenance of that ground as well. So all that is part of the development process and development agreement. Even when we go and sell some of the houses through NESIs, the new supply shared equity, or other mechanisms, then we should have a regime. And apologies if we haven't done that in any of our developments. I'm sure you'll point them out to us.
Okay, thank you. Graham?
Thanks, Chair. Just to go back to the Friars Venal thing, am I right that Mr Shirazi said that this fund was established in March of this year? And he's nodding his head, so I'll take that. That's the thick end of 7 months ago. I find it incongruous that a fund was established 7 months ago and they can't get the money distributed within 7 months. And you know, it's an eyesore. It is a big blot in the landscape. Could I suggest to Mr Shirazi that he forwards him his bank details or goes up to Edinburgh and collects a cheque? Because surely that's all it requires. It's been established that everybody's backing this, including the government. All they need to do is transfer the money. It's a simple operation. I mean, my bank would expect it, or my suppliers would expect to get forwarded quicker than 7 months, I can assure you.
Well, I'm not so sure that it is such a simple operation getting funding from Scottish Government, but
Chair, just on the back of what Graham's saying, we should maybe do a survey of some of the farmers that have been waiting maybe up to 2 years for money from the government.
Well, maybe we should. But, yeah, I'll bring James back in on that. Thank you. With regards to Friars Venal, I'm not too concerned about the cap payments, James.
I'm happy to share my bank details with the government, although my bank manager may have a call on it first. That fund was essentially a £50 million fund, so it's not a small fund. It's huge, and it's got to be spent by the end of March. You know, that's the restrictions on it. So March 2017. So it's got to be spent within this financial year. I think they've got a lot of good bids in. Ours is number one at the moment, being considered as number one. So they've got a lot of work to do between now and the end of March. And, you know, a lot of people are in the same position as us, that they're ready to go, and it's the government that are holding them back.
Very unfortunate. Okay. Members, any further questions on the report? No? We'll go with the recommendations then, please. Members are asked to agree 2.1, which is agree the former gate site is removed from the plan. 2.2, agree to include the new sites described at 3.32. 2.3, note the progress made towards the delivery of the affordable housing developments. 2.4, agree the revised strategic housing investment plan. 2.5, note the total cost of the Friars Venal project in Dumfries. Jim Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. Just before we leave this report, and obviously members have agreed 2.1, what is the future of that particular site in relation to the council's perspective? Because that'll finish up another blot in the landscape.
Anybody able to give that? Gates here. Yes, James.
We considered that a good area, good proposals, you know, and it would have meant that we could have secured a good proposal this year. We went and carried out a site investigation on both sides of the road. I think it was 3 meters full of rubber on peat, and the engineer's recommendation was that you shouldn't be building on it. The ground just wasn't stable enough to put anything on it. So from our perspective, that's why we've withdrawn from it. We couldn't make it work. And, you know, the Gates site is there. I don't know if somebody else can make it work. And the existing building, I think, is B listed, which I'm never quite sure whether it's a positive or a negative. But again, you know, in terms of housing, we wouldn't consider it as appropriate building for housing.
Yes, Jim.
Given my experience, category is a negative and no a positive outcome. I think that does beg the question. We should maybe refer this back to Planning and Environment Services Committee, because we have a duty to discharge as a contaminated land monitoring authority. And if it's no suitable for housing, we're going to have to do something at some stage. Although I'm surprised that they can build a 4th road crossing and you can't build houses on a site where there's a multi-storey factory with a huge construction build there. But anyway, that's no criticism of James and his professional deems judgment, I think we need to refer it back because we can't just leave it hanging in the air, Chair. It has to go somewhere, there has to be some conclusion on it.
Well, that largely depend on the site owners. You know, the site owners are responsible for the contaminated land clear up, but I know that the council has its locus on that as well, but we'll have it monitored. Okay, moving on, item 8, homelessness service. Have Lorna Campbell to help answer any questions on that as well. But Harry, have you anything to add to the report?
Just briefly, Chair, it's been mentioned earlier on in today's agenda about shining a light on council services, and I think if there's one part of my portfolio that's had a very strong light shone in it over the last 6 months, it's the homelessness service for very good reason. Delighted that Lorna Campbell was appointed as the one of my service managers responsible for the homelessness service. The North Star report that's contained as an appendix, it was completed, if members recall, between November 2015 and January 2016. So it's just a statement of fact, a snapshot at that time. What we've been focusing on is the improvement that we need to do to turn some of those round, and Lorna will go into some of the detail. Perhaps members will have questions on the specifics as well, but we certainly have been having a very ongoing constructive dialogue with the Scottish Housing Regulator that's been very, very helpful and very supportive of our efforts to improve the service to what ultimately is very vulnerable individuals within the region. Thanks, Chair.
Members, Alistair.
Well, first of all, Chair, let me echo Mr. Hayes' sentiments. I think it's absolutely important that we don't allow the situation to continue whereby it's perceived that Lorna has been gifted a poisoned chalice. The blunt fact of the matter is that we as elected members have got to drive these improvement plans forward and take them through. It does not make good reading, Chair, and I think all 47 of us would be of the view that we want to see our authority identified as an exemplar of good practice in everything it does. You certainly cannot say that about this particular area of activity at this moment in time. And the real sad and disappointing thing, as far as I'm concerned, is that I'm quite sure that those members who have had dealings on behalf of constituents with this particular area of the council's responsibility could tell you that it really has come as no surprise. And that's why I feel that it's absolutely essential, Chair, that we address the issues in question. Every confidence in Lorna's ability, as it were, supported by elected members to do so. But, it's, as Mr. Hay has said, it's an area of our activity which deals very often with the most vulnerable and disadvantaged members of our communities. And we've really got to get a grip of this, Chair, and drive it forward. I'll leave it at that for the moment, but as I say, profoundly disappointing, but not surprising, I would have to say.
No, I mean, I would agree, Alistair, when you consider the fact that this report was done just over a snapshot, as Harry said, a 3-month period, and there's over 50 recommendations for change. That's a statement of fact within itself. Other members? No? Okay. We can move to the recommendations then. Members are asked to consider and note the homelessness service improvements activities undertaken and to address issues highlighted in the North Star Executive Summary as detailed. Noted. Thank you. As I stated at the start of the meeting, members, we have a late report, so if we can have that distributed, and I'm happy to have a 10-minute recess for you to go through that, and then we'll reconvene. Are members happy that we continue on? If you've had time, I'm happy to give you further time, but no? Okay, thank you. We'll reconvene. A late report, Scottish Government Capital Stimulus Programme, ISH funding. Jim, would you like to add to the report or advise on the report?
Thanks, Chair. It's just to say that it's obviously described in the report, but it's a late report today because of the very short time scale we had to consult with our RSL partners, put a bid together and submit by the deadline. So that's why it's in front of members on day today.
Okay, Okay, members, Ian first, please.
Thanks. I suppose the only question I've got over this is putting the scrutiny hat on deliverability. It's mentioned in there. It does mention British Gas. It seems quite a short timeline though, within the financial year, but just reassurances that's achievable. Other than that, obviously, something I would be very, very willing to support.
James, are you able to come forward and answer that, please?
And that was one of the criteria that the grant has to be spent by the end of March 2017. We've currently got a contract up and running with British Gas, and the government will allow us to bring properties forward that were in next year's programme into this year's programme. So this year it will mean that we get something like 110 additional properties with full Class A central condensing combi boilers into their properties. And yes, British Gas are quite confident that they can do that.
Alistair?
On that basis, Chair, as far as I'm concerned, it's the proverbial no-brainer. We should get after it.
Members, Ronnie?
If there's any spare combi boilers at the end of this, I could do the replacement. No, seriously, sitting on planning, we get all these reams of the air storage heat pumps, and I've never really seen one up close. I just wondered how efficient they are and how they work. I know it's not to do with this, but I'm just interested.
James?
Yeah, the theory behind the air source heat pumps, they are, we went through 2 or 3 years of experimenting with areas where they don't have gas and what we could install instead of a gas combi boiler. And what we found was the most economic and efficient system are these air source heat pumps. It's just something that sits outside your house. It's electrically run, but it looks like a wet combination system in your house. So other than the gas boiler, everything else is the same. It heats the same. And the air source heat pump, the theory behind it is for every pound of energy, electric energy you put in, you get £3 back out. And we're finding tenants anywhere from, you know, £20, £30 a week. I think the most somebody saved was £160 a month when we put these in instead of the old storage radiators. So they're far, far more efficient. And what we found, even in tenants' homes where they haven't been able to, their energy bills haven't gone down, in some of the homes, they're heating the whole house now instead of just the one room. So the comfort levels have gone up in a number of the households. And what we're finding is it's the most efficient way of heating a tenant's home where there is no gas. We did a programme of about 1,800 of them. It does now require planning permission, so we do ask for planning permission for them all, for a small box that sits outside your house, but we do go through that process. So that's part of the installation programme.
Okay, thank you. Graham?
Yeah, I mean, as Alistair says, it's a no-brainer. I just hope that Mr Shirazi has much more success at getting his money for this scheme than he has in the previous report.
I would certainly agree with those comments, Graham. Yeah. The only question I would have about it is, obviously, it's a boiler replacement programme that you're going ahead with there. Is there any sort of criteria on the age of the property itself, or is it just related to the age of the boiler and the inefficiency of the boiler?
We've got 2 standards we're working to currently. One's the Scottish Housing Quality Standard as set out by the government, and the new one they brought in for 2020 is EISH. I forget what EISH stands for. Is it Energy Efficiency Scottish? That's the one. By virtue of what we've identified is a lot of our houses that have back boilers do not achieve that standard. And what we're doing is we're going in and replacing those back boilers with these A-rated central heating systems that will achieve the EISH standard by 2020. So they're much more efficient in terms of the tenant use in the house than what we've had in the house before.
Okay, members, can we go to the recommendations? 2.1, agree the funding application for DGHP for £500,000. 2.2, note the criteria for the funding application set out by the Scottish Government. Thank you. No further business. Thank you, members, for attending.